Hello, everybody. My name's Ahmet Soormally. I'm a consulting software engineer at Type Technologies. We offer an open source API gateway and management platform built from the ground up in Golang. And I work on both the product's feature set as well as assisting clients and pre-sales opportunities getting up and running with API management. I've been challenged today to see if I can essentially show you how to go from zero or just your APIs to a managed API within 15 minutes. So it's going to be a hardcore demo. You've built out your services. What next? Some of your challenges would include controlling who accesses your services, restricting which parts of your services are accessible, validating untrusted user input, preventing services from becoming overloaded, applying rate limits and quotas, releasing new versions of your APIs and services without causing downtime, understanding and monitoring how your services are being used through the use of analytics, etc., and enabling your consumers to self-serve. So an API gateway, or Tyke, should be able to help resolve these challenges, and I'm going to try in the next 15 or maybe 13 minutes or so now how you can achieve this. So it's basically demo time, and if there are any questions, we've got a stand, so feel free to come over and speak to me. Okay, so I'm going to quickly show you the dashboard, and what we're going to do is head over to the APIs tab. Now, what you can do is import an API, open API spec or something like that, but I'm going to show you how to do it manually. And because of the shoddy internet, I'm going to be proxying to the HTTP bin service, and I've got a local copy. So I'm going to point to localhost 8000, and for the time being, I'm going to remove authentication and press save. So for those of you who don't know what HTTP bin is, localhost 8000/get. It's a request response service, so I can test out my REST APIs, etc., and pretend this is my upstream service. Now, when I updated the API, as you can see, I'm hitting my local gateway /HTTP bin for the listen path /get. And if I send that request now, you'll see I'm now the gateway is receiving the request and reverse proxying to the upstream services. What I'm going to do now is quickly apply versioning. And we're specifying the version header location to be in the version data location to be in the header, and it's looking for the key being XAPI version. I'm going to set this to V1 and add another version, V2, and I'm going to set V1 as the default. And you've got the ability to override the target host or set expires headers, etc. And I'm going to head over to the endpoint designer and modify version 2 of my API. We'll just update that quickly. And what we're going to be doing is sending a request to the XML endpoint, which returns an XML response. And in version 2 of the API, when a request comes to the XML endpoint, what I want to do is perform a body transform. And I want to modify the response where the input type is XML. And using the Golang templating language, I think it's text template, I want to take the body and pipe that to a JSON Marshall function and update that API. What I also want to do is modify the header and modify the response header. And I'm going to add a content type application JSON and add that to the response header. So if I update this API, the gateway hot reloads its configurations, and now sending the request to the original endpoint, I still get XML back. But if I attach the x-API-version header and I put the value v2, so when I hit version 2 of the API and send that, I now get a JSON response. I'm going to quickly show you how we can do some other things. We want to validate our inputs. So when I send a post request to the post endpoint, what we want to do is validate our JSON. And we can control our return response code when the request is invalid. And what I'm going to be doing is inserting a JSON schema here. So I found one here. Copy that. And what we're saying, as you can see, using the draft 4 spec, we're saying that we've got various attributes being first name, last name, and age. And we've got a required field being the first name. So if I now paste that in here and update the request, update the API definitions, save that, the gateway hot reloads. And now when I send a post to the post endpoint, and we give it a body of, I'll just delete the body and put some junk in there. That's not a colon, is it? And send that request. We get a 422 unprocessable entity coming back with first name is required. So we're now validating the request before it's even touched our upstream services. I can make that correct by adding the first name. Send that request, and it now allows me through. So one other thing I wanted to quickly show you on the kind of things that we can do in the endpoint designer. Using Otto, we have our own ECMAScript 2015 JavaScript interpreter. So if I send a request to time, what I want to do is apply a virtual endpoint. And what this will do is execute a Lambda-style function, so you can write your own functions within the gateway itself. How do we do this? Let's pull out a function that I wrote last night, paste that in there, and what we're doing is it's receiving the request, it's performing a separate HTTP request to a world term service, so hopefully, fingers crossed, the internet's working, and what we're doing is composing this API and returning a response with simple date and then Stockholm time from the world time service, with a 200 status code. So if I now update this API and then send the request to http bin/time, and this should be a GET request, and send that request, fingers crossed the internet's working. Yes, and as you can see, we've called out to the world time service and got the Stockholm time. Now, that's all very well. You've got these APIs. We need to protect these APIs. Out of the box, we support various authentication modes, including auth token, JSON web tokens, OIDC, OAuth2, mutual authentication, even a custom authentication using a plugin. Tyke is fully extensible. You can write your own plugins with Python, Lua, or JavaScript. And for if you want to use your own languages, we can call out to a gRPC server, so you can write your plugins in whatever language that you want, whether that be .NET, C#, whatever, or Java. For simplicity, I'm going to apply auth token, which means we're looking for an authorization header. We press update the API. And just to show you it working, I send a request to the GET endpoint, and it will say authorization field missing. We create a policy, and we'll call this the free HTTP bin plan. We can apply rate limits and quotas. The policy acts as a template for all tokens which gain access to the service. I want to grant access to version 2 of the API, or you can do version 1 as well. You can apply path-based regex permissions if you want to. Let's create this policy. And then we want to publish this API to a catalog. So free HTTP bin, apply the policy, give it some description, give it some detail, attach some documentation. So let's go get our open API spec from here, copy that, paste that, attach the documentation, save that. So now our API is enabled. We've got documentation. Let's head over to the developer portal to see what's available. Mini CMS, you can write your own if you want to talk to Tyke's APIs. Let's have a look at the API catalog. We can view the documentation. You've got the full Swagger sandbox. Or we can just request an API key, which I'm going to do now. Congratulations, self-service. You can force key approval if you want to, but for the speed of this, I've just done it like this. What we're going to do now, apply the header, authorization header, and now I can send requests, and that should allow me through. Send a couple of requests, and then back to the management dashboard, we can view the activity by API to view your analytics of the kind of requests and responses that have been coming through. So the error which came back was unauthorized in the 422. We can also have a look at the activity by key. So this was my particular developer who sent 4 requests. We can look at endpoint popularity, geographic distribution. We use the Maxmind GeoIP database in order to give you a map of where your requests are coming through. Now, obviously, I'm on localhost, so nothing's coming up here. We can view your errors, and then we can even have a look at the log browser to see recording the request, response bodies, etc. And now, based on and just something else which is upcoming, which isn't fully ready yet. This is my dev environment on my local machine, but we've also been working on a local debugger, or debugger or tracer, so we can send test requests to the gateway in debug mode, so we can run unauthorized because it's got authentication, but you can test your middleware before you've even published it. So that's it. Thank you very much.